I was sitting in the third row of the Northside High School auditorium, on a hard plastic chair polished smooth by decades of other people's emotions. The stage was decorated with garlands of blue and gold balloons, the school colors. A banner hung above it. "Class of 2025, the future is yours." The exclamation point felt like a taunt. The school orchestra played Pomp and Circumstance in the background. Everything was perfect. Like a movie. Except for the hurricane raging inside me. I stared at the stage, where my son, Jacob James, my eldest, was about to appear. He wore his gown, mortarboard, and a gold cord for academic honors. He looked ready to step into the world. Strong. Confident. Almost a man. And there I was, holding an invisible time capsule in my heart, filled with sleepless nights, packed lunches, tears after practice, and victories after math tests. But no one saw that. No one except me. To my right sat Jason, me ex-husband, in a Hugo Boss suit, back straight, wearing his ever-present expression of, "I've got this." To his left sat Courtney, his new wife, the one who, as it turned out, had already been in the picture before the marriage ended. She was 10 years younger than me, with hair the color of expensive champagne and an Instagram-polished smile. They were holding hands. As the MC began listing the graduates' accomplishments, I noticed Courtney smiling at every mention of Jacob's name or son. I could almost hear the pride buzzing inside her. The pride I had earned through years of showing up. At one point, Jason leaned in and whispered something to her. She laughed and took a sip of wine from the Starbucks thermos she'd smuggled in. And suddenly I remembered him saying to me once, "You're just a mom, Emily. You don't work. You don't understand how the world works." But I had tried. For so many years. I swallowed and adjusted the dress I'd bought yesterday at Target. Simple blue with a V-neck, my graduation dress. I didn't want to look bitter or pitiful, just like someone who had done her best. Around me, other parents clutched balloons or bouquets. Some women dabbed their eyes when their children's names were called. I felt the sting in my throat, too. But I held it back. It was his day. Not mine. That's what everyone kept telling me these past weeks. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a thought stirred. Dangerous. Slightly insane. I didn't recognize it at first. What if I said something today, too? I shook it off. I wasn't on the speaker list. This was a school event. Protocol and order. But the thought came back. Why not? Why can't I? How many years had I stayed quiet? How many times had I told myself, don't make a scene, don't be emotional, better to be graceful than honest? I looked toward the stage at Miss Sanders, the English teacher who once called me and said, "Jacob is one of the most empathetic students I've ever taught. That's because of you." My hands were clammy, my heart pounded in my throat. I saw Jacob scanning the crowd, trying to find us. I stood up and waved. He smiled. Not at Jason. Not at Courtney. At me. It lasted only a second. But in that second, everything was there. Gratitude. Understanding. Love. And I knew if I didn't speak now, I'd regret it. Not because I wanted a spotlight, but because he deserved to hear who had been standing behind him all this time. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded paginate, a speech, just a rough draft. I'd written it at a cafe a few days ago, never truly believing I'd read it. I stood slowly, like I was stepping into the unknown. Miss Sanders turned and saw me. She paused for a moment. I nodded. She felt something. She handed me the microphone. The auditorium fell silent. I looked at Jason. He opened his mouth to say something, but didn't make it in time. I looked at Courtney. She didn't understand what was happening. I looked at my son. And he simply nodded at me, as if to say, "Speak, Mom, I'm here." And I took the mic. I stood there with the microphone in my hand, but my mind wasn't on the stage, the audience, or the graduation. My mind was 3 years in the past. We were in the kitchen, Jason and I. I was making him eggs, even though, by that point, I honestly couldn't stand the smell of bacon anymore. He was scrolling through his phone, half smiling, something on LinkedIn as usual. "You see who liked my post on team leadership?" "No, who?" I replied automatically, flipping the eggs. "VP from Salesforce. I think I might actually get a pitch meeting in San Francisco. I nodded. Classic Jason. Always in pitch mode even at breakfast. Then he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about, I don't know, doing something again? Taking a course? Starting something?" I turned. Something? What exactly is something to you? He shrugged and put down his phone. Well, you're just, a mom. Jacob's in middle school, Sarah's in 4th grade. You've got time. You could start something, not just Pinterest boards and lunchboxes. He laughed. He thought it was witty. It physically hurt. It wasn't the first time he'd said things like that, but before, he used to wrap them in concern. Just a mom? I repeated, trying not to choke. I didn't mean it negatively, Emily. It's just, you don't work. I carry the whole load. We live off my income. You don't really create anything, except the kids' schedule. I bring home the money, and you just? He went silent, and that silence was louder than any scream. I stood there in my old University of Georgia sweatshirt, the one we used to share. I thought about how he admired women in business, liked stories of self-made founders, posted quotes from Brené Brown. And yet at home, he looked right through me like I was invisible. Back to the auditorium. Graduation, Atlanta, June, thick air and the scent of celebration. I stood before dozens of faces and all I could hear was his voice. You don't create anything, Emily. Add number, I don't launch startups. I don't earn quarterly bonuses. I don't pitch a team vision over Zoom. But I created a safe home, a place to cry, to make mistakes, to try again. I raised children who know how to apologize, who respect others, who choose kindness even when no one's watching. I created mornings with toast and nights with books. I built thousands of little things that actually make up a life. And all of it is invisible, because I'm just a mom. Jason sits in the crowd, face like stone. Maybe he thinks I'm about to make a scene. Maybe he thinks I don't know where the line is. But I do. I know that sometimes words aren't for drama, they're for truth. They're for reclaiming your name. There are a lot of parents in this room, I began into the mic. Some work in hospitals, some in offices, some from home, some between shifts. And some are like me. People who've heard the words, "You're just a mom," and smiled because it hurt too much to answer. I hear someone in the audience gasp. Someone in the front row wipes a tear. Today, my son is graduating. He won a math award. He wrote an essay his teacher recommended for publication. And no, I wasn't sitting beside him when he wrote it. But I was beside him when he didn't believe in himself. When he had no friends. When he came home and said, "Mom, I'm a loser." I was there. I'm just a mom. The room is completely still. I glance over at Jason. He's looking down. Courtney has her arms crossed. And suddenly, I realize I don't need their approval. It doesn't define me anymore. I turn to Jacob. He's looking at Minot with embarrassment, but with pride. I see it in his eyes, and that's enough. The microphone shakes slightly in my hand, but my voice is steady. Just a mom, I repeat. Sometimes it sounds like a sentence, but sometimes it's a superpower. And right there, in front of everyone, I feel myself taking my voice back. After the speech, I returned to my seat to applause. But inside, I could still hear the echo of Jason's words. You don't create anything. You're just a mom. Like someone had put an old record on repeat. Like all those years, all those days and nights had just vanished. I remember how it all started. We moved to the suburbs of Atlanta when I was 5 months pregnant with Jacob. Jason had landed a job at an ad agency on Peachtree Street with a view of downtown and endless promises of growth. He wore Brooks Brothers shirts and talked about vision boards, while I wore stretched-out t-shirts and kept count of how many diapers were left in the pack. I used to get up 3-4 times a night, then 6. First to feed, then to sit by the crib when he was teething. Then, when he was scared of the dark, when Sarah was born, all of it doubled. I was everywhere and nowhere. All the photos show smiling kids, but I remember how I felt behind the scenes. When the school had a science fair, it was my project just with Jacob's hands. When we needed a costume for the Black History Month performance, I learned to use a sewing machine on YouTube 3 nights before the deadline. When Sarah caught chickenpox, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I stayed up cooling her fever, rubbing her back, singing lullabies. And then I made coffee for Jason because he had to be fresh by 9 o'clock. Everything I did was like air, invisible but essential. No one asked me how I was doing. They asked, "Where are Jacob's socks? Did you schedule Sarah's orthodontist appointment? What's for dinner?" I was a dispatcher, a nurse, a therapist, a nutritionist, a schedule coordinator. Unpaid, no days off, no gratitude. There was one evening. Jason hosted a dinner for clients at home. He ordered catering, lit candles, turned on jazz. Then he said, "You look amazing. I wish you dressed like this more often." I nodded, smiled. Because we had guests. Because it was important for him. Because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. But inside, I wanted to scream. You only see me when I'm in a dress. Not when I'm standing in the kitchen at 6 a.m., trying to defrost waffles because the kids have a test today and I want them to start the morning with something warm. You only see me when I'm quiet. Not when I'm crying in the car in the Trader Joe's parking lot because I can't remember the last time I ate alone. I didn't blame him for everything. But I blamed myself for believing for so long. If I'm a good mother, a good wife, they'll notice me, they'll love me, they'll value me. But the truth is, when you do your job well, no one notices. That's why so many women like me feel empty. Because everything we do is seen as just part of it. That's why, when I said, "I'm tired," they replied, "Tired from what? You're home all day." One of those days, I sat on the laundry room floor, next to the washing machine. I set a timer and gave myself 10 minutes to cry. Just to let it out before the kids saw me. And then back to the smile. Because that's what you do. But today, at this graduation, for the first time I realized I don't want to be invisible. I don't have to disappear for my family to exist. I'm still a mom. But I'm no longer just. The divorce didn't happen with a scandal. There were no plates thrown against the wall. No courtroom drama. He just came home one evening and said, "We're too different." And I was too exhausted to argue. It was strangely quick. He hired a lawyer from Boca Raton, paid everything up front, and sent me a list of reasonable terms. The Ford Explorer for you. Child support fixed at $1,200 a month. The house stays with you until the kids turn 18. On paper, generous. But in reality, it wasn't division, it was deletion. He didn't want a shared parting. He wanted me to disappear quietly. To stay in the background, just without the title of wife. After I signed the papers, I sat alone in our house in Roswell. The kids were with him for the weekend. And everything around me felt foreign. Photos on the wall from our family vacation. And us at Universal Studios in Orlando. I'm holding Sarah, Jacob's eating ice cream. Candles I'd bought on sale at Target still on the mantle. His old running shoes in the closet, the ones he didn't have time to grab. I looked at all of it and felt, not anger, emptiness. It was like I had died to someone but stayed alive myself. And that's maybe the scariest feeling of all. To still be alive and yet erased. He took what he called the important things. His laptop, dumbbells, a few suits, his Sonos speaker. And I was left with the kids' toothbrushes, notes that said, "Mom, good luck at open house," and a planner still filled with reminders. Parent-teacher meeting 6:30 p.m. Bring cupcakes for class. Call the orthodontist. He left, but the schedule stayed mine. The strangest part came later. The kids started looking at me differently, as if I was no longer the center of their universe. As if Dad became more important just because now he was new. Jason quickly had Melissa, a girl from his office, blonde part-time yoga instructor. They took the kids to Cumming Park on weekends, posted pictures with captions like, Modern Family, we choose love. And I stood in line at Costco with a pack of lunchboxes, thinking, when did I become not just his ex but my own? One night, driving home, I accidentally played his favorite song, Heroes, by David Bowie. I used to turn it off halfway. But that night I listened to the whole thing. We can be heroes just for one day. And I thought, where's my day? When do I get to be the hero not out of someone else's need, but by my own choice? I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, and realized I didn't disappear the day he signed the papers. I disappeared all those years before, when I kept agreeing to be just support. The divorce was just the period at the end of a sentence that had already ended long ago. And now, a new one begins. After the divorce, I tried not to search for meaning in every day. I just lived like I was drifting down a river. No shore, no compass. But one day, something changed. It happened in a small public library in Atlanta, in the Inman Park neighborhood. I was there with Jacob to pick up books for his school project. There was an open mic night, a local event where anyone could come up and share a poem, a story, or simply speak their mind. I sat in the audience holding my notebook. Inside a few short thoughts I'd written late at night, after the kids were asleep and the house finally fell silent. They were reflections about what it means to be a mom, and to slowly lose yourself in the process. Why not try? I thought, looking at the mic on stage. When they called my name, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I walked up and opened my notebook. This isn't a long speech, I said. It's just a letter to myself and to every mom who feels invisible. I began to read. Motherhood isn't just taking care of children. It's 3 a.m. when you get up to soothe a crying baby. It's thousands of tiny things no one sees. Schedules, sleepless nights, doctor visits, tears, and laughter. Motherhood is being a hero without a cape and without a stage. It's being strong when the world thinks you're weak. I noticed someone in the audience smile. Then someone chuckled not out of mockery, but out of relief. Then came the applause. Some people handed me tissues, a few were even crying. In that moment, I realized that my voice mattered. Not because I invented something. Not because I had millions in the bank. But because I spoke my truth. Afterward, a woman approached me tall, with silver woven into her braids. She introduced herself as Maggie, a local poet and activist. "You were amazing," she said. Too often we forget that motherhood is work worthy of respect and recognition. "Thank you," I replied, trying not to cry. Sometimes, I forget that myself. It was a small turning point, like the first ray of sunlight after a long night. I felt a timid, but real desire to move forward. Even if just one step at a time. After that night, I started seeking out more spaces like that. Places where people spoke honestly, where my words could be heard, where I could stop being just a mom. After that night at the library, I realized I wasn't alone. Almost immediately after my reading, women started coming up to me. Women who also felt like they were just moms, just housewives, or just someone. Different stories, same feeling. We'd been ignored for too long. One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe in Chattahoochee, I met Lisa, a writer and freelancer raising 2 kids on her own. She told me how she'd tried to balance work and motherhood, but society only saw her as either a stay-at-home mom or a hustler, never as successful. Another time, I met Maria, a single mother from Maryland, who had just started a podcast about real motherhood and the struggle with self-worth. We quickly realized, if we came together, our voices would be louder. That's how the idea for Mother Actually was born. A small podcast where we didn't tell polished stories, but honest ones. Each episode was about fears, victories, mistakes, about how hard it is to be a woman and a mother in today's world. Our first episode was dedicated to anyone who felt invisible. We talked about those nights when you just want to turn off the light and disappear. About those moments when everything feels like it's falling apart, but you still hold it together for the kids. The response was immediate. Likes, comments, Messages from women in California, New York, Chicago, even small towns in Iowa, all thanking us for our honesty and courage. "Thank you for saying what I've been thinking all night," wrote one woman from Minneapolis. "Your words helped me stop feeling so guilty," shared another from San Diego. Day by day, I felt something new waking up inside me. A warmth that came from connection, from being understood. A community of women who refused to let each other disappear. It was my first real step toward no longer being just a mom. And I knew this was only the beginning. My son's graduation night was approaching, and with each passing week, a quiet anxiety kept growing inside me. Jacob and Sarah were getting ready for their big day, but my heart was drawn to something deeper. What this night was supposed to mean for me. Jason, my ex-husband, sent me a message. "I think it's best if I speak on behalf of our family at graduation. Of course, you're welcome to attend, but let's keep the role of official representative with me." His words landed like a cold verdict. As if I was just the mom, the one who stayed behind the scenes, who existed within the walls of the home and nowhere else. Like he was reminding me, "You're not the main character, you're the shadow in the background." Those words hit harder than I expected. I'd heard versions of them before, in silence, in glances, in decisions made without me. But never when our family was meant to be celebrating. I thought back to all those years when I was just a mom to Jason. Without recognition, without respect. How he gave speeches at work about leadership, while at home, he barely acknowledged the work I did. In his eyes, I was the wife who stayed home, and that somehow meant my sacrifices didn't count. But this time, something inside me lit up. I realized this night wasn't just a celebration for my kids. It was my night, too. The night I could stand up and show the world what it really means to be just a mom. I replied to Jason, short and clear. "Thank you, but I'll be speaking." A small sentence, but for me, it was a massive win. In the days that followed, I wrote my speech. Not polished, not perfect, but real. About struggle, about sacrifice, about a love that doesn't demand applause, but deserves respect. I knew that on that night, many of the people who once looked down on me would be in that room. But I wasn't hiding anymore, because I am not just a mom. I'm a woman who fought, who fell, who got back up. A woman who refused to let her story end at the words, "just a mom." Graduation night arrived. The atmosphere in the Atlanta school auditorium was both festive and tense. Teachers, parents, friends, everyone had gathered to celebrate this important milestone in our children's lives. I sat next to Jacob, my son, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. There were familiar faces all around, some friendly, others slightly skeptical. I remembered how Jason had insisted he would speak on behalf of the family. But now I knew it was my turn. The ceremony followed its usual rhythm. Teachers gave speeches, the school orchestra played the anthem, graduates walked the stage to receive their diplomas. Then the host announced, "If someone from Jacob's family would like to say a few words, please raise your hand." The room seemed to hold its breath. And unexpectedly, even to myself, I stood up. All eyes turned to me. Each step I took toward the stage was met with silence, broken only by the quiet clicks of phone cameras. The microphone in my hand was cold, but now it felt like an ally. I looked out at the audience, at the faces that once labeled me as just a mom, and I began to speak. "Good evening. My name is Emily, and I'm Jacob's mom. I am not just a mom. I'm his first teacher, his support, his inspiration. I've been there through the sleepless nights when he learned to read and write. I've celebrated his first victories and helped him stand after his first falls. Being a mother means being an entire universe to your child, even if no one ever says it out loud. Tonight, I'm proud not only of Jacob, but of every woman who does the impossible every single day while still being just herself." With every word, I felt strength rising inside me. The audience listened in silence, hanging on each sentence. Hundreds of eyes were on me, but I was looking right back at them. When I finished, the room erupted into applause. People stood, some were even crying. and in my son's eyes I saw pride and gratitude. In that moment, I knew I was no longer a shadow. I was a voice that could no longer be ignored. And that was my true victory. When the microphone landed in my hands, I felt it. These weren't just words. This was my truth. I took a deep breath and began to speak. Softly at first, but with each sentence, my voice grew stronger. Asterisk, asterisk. When I look at Jacob today, I don't just see a graduate. I see a little boy who used to be afraid of the dark, who had to learn how to trust himself and the world. Being a mother means being there on the scariest nights, when no one sees your tears. Being a mother means learning to be strong, even when your own heart is breaking. And no one teaches you how to do it. Without recognition, without applause, without a simple thank you. I'm not blaming anyone. I just want everyone to hear this. Being a mom is not just. It is the most important job in the world. I am not just a mom. I am the architect of the soul standing before you today. Asterisk, asterisk. Silence filled the auditorium. Then, 1, 2, 3 claps. Then a wave of applause. Then a standing ovation. People were crying. And Jason, my ex-husband, stood in the back of the room, and for once, he couldn't hide his emotions either. In that moment, I realized that victory isn't about revenge. It's not about anger. Victory is about being heard, about being respected. Victory is the strength you find the moment you stop hiding. When I stepped down from the stage, people came up to me, thanking me. "You spoke for so many of us," said one woman. "I thought I was alone in this," whispered another. That speech wasn't just mine. It was a recognition of millions of mothers, of women doing the impossible every day. And for one night, I was proud to be their voice. When I stepped off the stage, a wave of emotions washed over me. Laughter, tears, applause. But beyond that hall, a new chapter of my life began. The video of my speech quickly spread across social media. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Posts with quotes, clips with highlights. People shared, commented, forwarded to friends. One day, NPR reached out, inviting me to share my story on their morning show. Then came podcast invitations, and even a TEDx talk in Atlanta. But it wasn't about fame or likes. The most important moment happened the night I came home. Jacob, my son, came up to me and hugged me tight. So tight that I felt the full depth of our bond. He whispered in my ear, "Mom, you're not just a mom, you're my hero." In that moment, all the words, doubts, and fears melted away. I realized my role has always been more than just mom. It's a story about strength, love, and recognition. Now, when I look toward the future, I know my voice is not only my own tool, it's a light for many others. And with that quiet pride, I keep moving forward. Not for someone else's approval, but for myself and those I love.